Thank you very much, Mr Chair. The title of this bill is the Education Freedom of Association Amendment Bill, and it's probably one of the more misleading titles that I've seen on a bill, and there are a number of alternatives that we could put up for it. And actually, it just occurs to me that the Minister and the Chair, actually the first time we met, the former Minister, the current member and the Chair, the first time we met was at the Massey University Clubs Day, an event organised by the Student Association. I was a candidate for the Labour Party, and Heather Roy was an MP. And we met there, and that was an event organised by a student association that was completely aware of what its funding was going to be for that year, so it could organise its events, it could plan fantastic events like that Clubs Day, which was extremely well attended. We hula hooped together, that's absolutely correct. But I think that, but speaking about the title and alternative titles for this bill, speaking of alternative titles for this bill, I think the most obvious one is the Education Ignore Tertiary Students Amendment Bill, not least because of the submissions that came to the Select Committee, the over 4,000, actually closer to 5,000 submissions that came to Select Committee. 98% were opposed to this bill, not least because of that, but because the genesis of this bill is absolutely undetectable. It is impossible to know where this bill came from. Where were all the petitions? Where were the protests? Where were the letters to all the members of Parliament begging us to change the legislation because students were so put down by the current legislation, by the status quo? It just isn't there. This bill is not responding to something that students have asked for. It is not responding to something that students need. Therefore, the title of this bill should be the Ignore Tertiary Students Bill, because there is no need for this bill. There is no need. In fact, the evidence tells us that students are very, very satisfied with the status quo. Because in Auckland, they had a referendum, they changed to voluntary, it seems to be going okay for them, they're quite happy. In Waikato, they had a referendum, they changed to voluntary, it didn't work for them very well, they had a referendum again, they went back to compulsory, that seems to be working for them quite well. At Massey, they had a referendum, and the students there overwhelmingly voted in favour of a universal student association. Interestingly, it was the extramural students who voted most overwhelmingly, the ones who you might think superficially would get the least out of being members of a student association. They saw the value to them of their student association being universal. There is no call for this bill. This bill should be called the Education Ignore Tertiary Students Bill. But another very appropriate name for this bill would be the Education Increase Student Fees Bill. It's as simple as that, really. There is the obvious, and that is what has been explained to us at Select Committee and what we've heard from thousands of students and from student associations across the country. In fact, the only student association we haven't heard this from is the made-up one that seems to exist only in Heather Roy's email inbox, which probably from an email that originated from her own email system, I should imagine. The real student associations and the real students are telling us this is going to increase fees. And the tertiary institutes themselves are telling us that this bill will increase fees because they will have to step in, they will have to take over the student services, and they simply will not be able to do that at the current rate that the student associations are able to do. The student associations are able to rely on voluntary labour, they're able to rely on a whole range of things that enable them to keep their costs down. The universities and the polytechnics will not be able to do the same thing. Therefore, the actual practical outcome of this bill is that it will increase student fees. But it goes one step further than that, because the other thing this does is to silence the student voice, and that particularly the student voice on the university and polytechnic councils. And the student voice is listened to very carefully by those councils, and it is a force to keep student fees down, because when the councils are setting those fees, they have to listen to students. They have to listen to students who come from a representative body who are able to get training in being good advocates for their members, and they are able to go to that council and they are able to advocate for keeping fees within a reasonable limit. This bill will gut those student services and will completely silence that student voice. And there's another reason why we'll see student fees just going up and up and up. And actually, although we know the National Party is not satisfied with this bill, Although we know the National Party is not satisfied with this bill,
Colin King.
I move that the